this happen, and especially to the moderator and fellow candidates for postponing this event. This was originally scheduled last week, but everyone was so kind as I needed to be in my Quakertown community last week. So I want to start with that. I want to start with how the events in Quakertown on February 20th and the events now in Iran are 6,000 miles apart and of course of different scales, but I think profoundly connected. Connected because they are manifestations of a culture of aggression, influenced by countries or ideological groups that want control and that perceive violence as strength. I think when anyone is in a position of power, whether that be in the federal government or in local law enforcement, it is imperative that escalation is a last resort. Rushing into violence is not strength, it's weakness and it's failure. We need diplomacy and dialogue and de-escalation, and those things are hard. They are things that require true strength and intelligence, respect, and trust. I open with this because I think that this culture of bullying is becoming more pervasive, and it is a root cause of a lot of the issues that we're seeing today. It is critically important that we talk about it. It's critically important how we talk about it as aspiring politicians, because when elected officials are silent, that silence is very loud. Thank you.
Tom, you can go next.
My name is, I think my microphone is not working.
It is.
It was, okay, good. So my name is Tom Taft. I'm the father of 4 and grandfather of 8. I have in my life been a teacher, a carpenter, a licensed general and solar contractor, a public finance investment banker, and for the 29 years I was the chief operating officer at Germantown Academy. And for the last 4.5 years, I've been building my own house, which when it's finished, I believe will be net zero, generating more electricity than it uses. It's my commitment to trying to contribute in a small way to climate change. I think the thing that pushes me most directly here to try to do this year is that I have suffered through all 5 of Brian Fitzpatrick's victories. And I've written a number of opinion pieces that have been published in the Herald and the Inquirer, trying to point out the farcical nature of Brian Fitzpatrick's role in history as a our congressional representative. And I think that what will be important today is that we focus on 2 things. Not only what we could do if we had free reign in Congress and would want to try to accomplish, and then also try to address exactly what Lucia has brought up, which is the direction that the Republican Party has taken us. And even though Brian has hundreds of press releases and I read them all, basically they're zero-sum games and they end up being a statement of silence. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michael Zeltikons. You probably haven't heard of me because I've never run for anything before, and I'm fairly new to this area. I didn't intend on running for anything. I was motivated to this by Minnesota. And I have a history, my background is with the military. I spent 10 years with the Navy and then another 9 years with the State Department, working to bring Americans back to safety from hurricanes, earthquakes, war, COVID. And watching what happened in Minnesota, I don't need to take you all through that, but when the government acts in that way without shame or remorse, and continues to do so over time with intention, that's very scary to me. And that motivated me into this race. I looked at our congressman, as I'm sure we'll hear more about tonight, and understood that my congressman was lying to me quite a bit. My congressman was, my Republican congressman breathed life into this bill, and then told me that he had no part in that. And then my Democratic nominee was also quite unsatisfying. My Democratic nominee had no public appearances, had no positions on his website, and if I wanted to know anything more about him, the first thing I had to do was give him money and register. That also felt like something that was not supporting representative democracy. I got into this race and found out that there's quite a few things happening there not supporting representative democracy. I'm sure we'll go all through that today. But I am thrilled to be here with you today and very grateful for the opportunity. And I do want to point out that this forum was arranged by folks who just wanted an opportunity to put all of the Democratic nominees on the stage together. And they did that out of their civic duty, a responsibility, a feeling that the voters of Bucks ought to be able to hear from all of their Democratic nominees, including the establishment nominee. And I deeply appreciate that and this opportunity to speak. That's all for me. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tracy Hunt. As everybody else has said, thank you so much for coming out and taking the time to hear from candidates that you usually don't get to hear from because the establishment only wants you to hear from their candidate. I am a 30-year resident of Bucks County. I've been an attorney in Bucks for 27 years. I've represented a number of townships and boards of supervisors and borough councils and things like that, along with other civil law litigation that I've done. I've sued the National Football League, Bank of America. I've represented unions. I am a union member as well because in addition to having been an attorney here for 27 years, I have also been a university professor at Delaware Valley University. I'm a tenured full professor there, and I've taught business law and some of their sports law courses. And as a result of that, I'm a member of the AFT and the AAUP. So similar to a lot of us, right, that there's something that happens or there's a moment or there's just a feeling that you can't take this anymore. And I was kind of in that last basket, I guess. It was a level of frustration, the continuing to wait for our politicians or any politicians to step up and start doing kind of what we, the people, right, the 70 to 80% of us that are more alike than apart, to start doing something. And all I saw was gaslighting, hypocrisy and incompetence, frankly. So I'm at a point in my life. I have a 26-year-old and a 24-year-old. I have two daughters. I'm a girl dad. They're adults trying to live their life, and I'm at a point where I have a skill set and that I think would contribute and add to the process, not make it worse. And I decided that if they're not going to step up and start becoming more effective leaders as our elected officials or wannabe elected officials, then why can't somebody from the public do it? And that's one of the little sort of taglines that I use, is that I'm running as a constituent, not as a politician. And I truly believe that. And I've had people tell me, well, you're a politician now because you got in the race. I don't think it is. I think that's a label. It's not a career choice. If it is, that should be the first disqualifier, is that when they've decided that's their career choice, that should be, to me, that's a negative marker, not a positive one. So I've had two careers. I've been an attorney and I've been a university professor. Those are my careers. This is something that I felt compelled to do because I thought I could add to the process. And I'm hopeful that the voters of Bucks County will get a chance to hear me and other candidates similarly aligned that are being, as much as they can, are being squeezed out. So I appreciate you coming out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. We're going to have time to go through a lot of issues here tonight. I'm going to kind of start with kind of the uncomfortable question. Absent the party endorsement, I'm going to go to Tracy first on this one. Absent the party endorsement, we know about all the money coming into this race from outside the district and what the party machines can bring to bear on a race like this. How do you compete without the backing of either the Bucks or Montgomery County parties? And what is the path forward to victory?
All right, thank you, John, for that question. So, from my perspective, and the folks sort of working with me, we believe, right, that between now and the primary, you're going to need money, but it's not the kind of money that I think your question infers, or the kind of money that Ryan's raising and things like that. So I believe, and I know from talking to prospective donors that there are a number of Democratic donors sitting on the sidelines waiting this primary out. They're gonna donate, but they're not putting their thumb on the scale, unlike the Bucks County Democratic Committee, which has definitely put its thumb on the scale. So Bob Harvey has, as the endorsed candidate, has had a head start on fundraising because they have circled the wagons, and some of his donors are other elected officials in other counties, and and he's tapped into that network of party politics. But I don't think that it's going to be an exorbitant number to get to the primary. I think whoever prevails from the primary, from the Democratic side, I think there is going to be plenty of motivation. I don't think, from my perspective, you're going to see party loyal donors, if Bob's not their candidate, pulling back. Everybody wants this seat to flip. All the Democrats, I'll say, want the seat to flip, and I think that they will support financially any of us that would prevail in the primary.
Thank you. Mike?
I don't need $7 million to win, and I don't need $1 million to win. In fact, I think it's offensive that folks do. I think that the $7 million is needed for candidates who are bad to forgive the fact that they're bad, to manipulate the public into believing that they're good. But if you have a clear heart and a clear head, I don't think you need $1 million to win Bucks County and a sliver of Montco. I think the folks that I've run into on the petition trail have been angry, they've been frustrated, and they're gonna turn out. And I think the candidate that they want to see has fire and firmness. And I think the candidate that they are gonna get when they are finally allowed to be introduced to their establishment candidate, they're gonna find out it's a sack of milk duds and a blue sweater. And that, I wore crap today. But, look, super nice guy. That's what I hear from everybody. I'm gonna win because I'm not a nice guy. I'm gonna win because Democrats are tired of getting run over. I'm gonna win because Democrats want somebody with a spine who's willing to go to Washington and not look for friends, but go to Washington, grab people by the neck, and start doing what needs to be done. There's a line in the sand that we've all been thinking about drawing for a while, and this is the last chance we get to draw it. This is the line in the sand. If we don't get it right this time, it's over, I think. So I get a little charged up, but look, yeah, I'll stop there. I don't think I need millions of dollars to convince people that I'm the right candidate to represent them in Washington.
Thank you, Tom.
So I know Scott Wallace fairly well, and when he ran in a non-presidential year, he won the primary with just 30,000 votes. And it seems to me, as I've talked to people out there, as soon as you actually get down to the primary, people have a choice to make. I have not sensed any enthusiasm about the current establishment Democratic candidate. And I believe it's possible, again, without needing a huge amount of money, you're triggering Democrats who are activist Democrats who care about the issues, who are aware of what's going on. And to be honest with you, I think the current endorsed candidate does not have the firepower, the will, the burning in his gut to do it. And I believe once you get into that primary season and you're running full blast, it does not take a huge amount of money, it takes a convincing message. And the message is, I think, in line with what Mike has said, what everyone has said here, we need fire, we need commitment, we need an absolute belief that we have things to offer and that we are not going to let our role as Congress members be something that is simply a matter of going along to get along. This has got to be a time when we step up and say we can make a difference, we can change the course of this country, we're going to stop being open to a man who is clearly aspiring to be a dictator, run for a third term. And I don't think it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of passion. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna ask that we not applaud. Just, yeah. I'm gonna go to,
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what's been said. I think there's an advantage to not being the endorsement candidate because people are the establishment candidate. People are tired of the establishment. And what I've been hearing is that there's a perception that both parties are the same. And I think that that feeling has merit. And to Mike's point earlier, when you hear one party say they need to match dollar for dollar with the other party is fundraising. and that is 7, I don't know, 8, $15 million. During an affordability crisis, it feels so disconnected from the realities that we're living. And we need to use the shame that the money in politics is, and use that as a tool to use less money ourselves and to prove that we are actually here to do the work. And you don't need all that money to do the work. And if you think you do, I would really encourage everyone to check out the public FEC filings, because a lot of the boxes that people say you need to check on a campaign, I question whether you need to check those boxes. And if you do, I question how do you need to check those boxes? Because sending hundreds of thousands of dollars to DC consultant firms does not feel like the way to win a race or a good use of money. I genuinely think that in addition to showing spine and conviction, we also need to generate excitement. This isn't just about the anger towards what's happening, it's about ideas that we have. It's about getting people out to vote that have lost faith in our process. Anyone who is concerned about fundraising should be concerned about excitement. This race is not on the DCCC red to blue list. Now, we hear all the time that this is a flippable district, this is a swing district. Why is it not on that list? It's not because people aren't excited by the establishment. So we have a lot of work to do, and I think that alternative campaigns and alternative ways of bringing people into the campaign trail can generate that movement and build that excitement. I'm finding that there is so much solidarity in making change and in making good change that people are willing to devote their time and their talents, and that creates this movement that people own. And that's the way that we can win without an unconscionable amount of campaign funds.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask about Iran. It's been in the news, obviously, a lot since the weekend. And I think as a Democratic primary forum, we can all say probably that Congress needs to be the ones who make the call when it comes to going to war. I want to set that issue aside and say, if you were elected to Congress, without saying the name Trump, what is the path forward here? And I'm going to start with Tom.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things to recognize about Iran, just right at the beginning, is that the United States, through the CIA, overthrew a legitimately elected prime minister of Iran in 1953, Mosaddegh, and we installed the Shah of Iran in his place. And what the Shah of Iran did was treat people so badly that we got the theocracy that we have today. And it's really critical that Americans begin to recognize the responsibility they have for having created the Iran we had today. It was a functioning democracy based on the British parliamentary system. We threw the man out, and the reason we did it is because he nationalized their oil. And unless we really understand that we went into Iran, we took it over, we installed the Shah because we wanted their oil, how can we be surprised that a theocracy grew up in response to what the Shah was doing to his own people, and in response to the violence of the Shah, we got a theocracy that's even more violent, and now we think that we're going to bomb them out of their own country? It is a fool's errand to have done it, and I think the most important thing is to demonstrate to people the truth of what happened in Iran from 1951 right through to today. We're the ones that created the mess, and it's foolish for us to think that you're going to bomb Iran enough so that 90 million people are going to give up and say, well, we'll do what you want. So I won't mention the person's name, but this was a fool's errand to undertake it, and it just simply has to be stopped, and the best way to do it is through the truth of what we did to that country 75 years ago.
Thanks, Tom. We'll go to Lucia next.
I agree with that, Tom, very much. I think it is imperative that as potential elected officials, we are honest about the United States' role in foreign policy, the real motivations and the real consequences, and not to claim some false moral authority where we don't have it. I would say that in addition to some of the history that Tom pointed out, I was in Tehran in May 2018 teaching mathematics when Trump pulled, oops, I'm not allowed to say that name, when the United States pulled out of the nuclear deal that had been arranged under the previous administration. That was a breach of trust. That was our breach of trust. And then I was in Congress in January 2020 when we were very close to going to war with Iran again. I was in private congressional briefings. We were this close again to intervening. So this is a history of us leaving serious footprints without follow through for our own special interests. And I think that has to be made very clear. I think it's also clear that when we talk about it, we front load the impacts that we're having. We just bombed a girls' school, right? That's what we did. And I'm not sure for what reason or for what outcome. As a congressperson, we need to rein in the power of defense contractors, of arms dealers, and by doing that, we really need to change the power balance here. Congress has authority. Congress passes the NDAA. This is the National Defense Authorization Act, which authorizes funding for the Pentagon. An agency that has never passed a full audit. I would say we need to do that to restore a balance of power, absolutely. We need to leverage other powers of Congress up to the point of delivery, but Congress rarely utilizes this. So there are powers that Congress has that need to be leveraged, and we also need to be really honest about what the United States does and has done. This is a costly, costly intervention, and money would be better.
She leaves off on that in that I do believe that a big part of the foundation of why I'm running in my campaign is this return to checks and balances, right? The co-equal branches of government. And I believe Congress has just relinquished so many of those powers and so much of that authorization that allows things for like this to have happened with Iran or Venezuela or any number of unauthorized military actions that our country has taken. And a big part of what my role would be in Congress is to reassert those authorities, bring them back in, not only the oversight and the ability to write law and revise law and reform law, but also the budget, the purse strings, right? Congress, that is the job. They are lawmakers, and that is what they are supposed to do. So I am highly bothered by the fact that our Congress and just sitting there and acting like there's nothing they could have done about this or that there's no steps that they can take. There are a number of steps they could have taken and should have taken and have chosen not to. Secondarily, I'm very bothered by the fact that I am the son of a 30-year U.S. Army 82nd Airborne Command Sergeant Major. I spent the first 20 years of my life at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, with the exception of second grade. Other than that, I am the least traveled Army brat I've ever met. My father did 2 tours in Vietnam and countless other missions that they were sent on as part of the 82nd Airborne. Part of what angers me the most is that this administration is acting, they have an initial idea of why they want to act. They're not sharing it with anybody, but they seem to have that, and they have no game plan beyond that. They have no larger plan. They have no exit strategy. Anybody who pays even a little bit of attention to foreign policy of the Middle East understands Iran is not, Venezuela. It is not Kuwait. It is not Iraq. It is a different beast that we've gotten involved in this with no clear strategy as to why or how we're going to get out. And that's inevitably, we've already lost some of our soldiers, and there's probably countless thousands of innocent Iranians who have been killed, I'm sure. But from my perspective as the son of somebody who was deployed a lot during my first 20 years of life is the loss of American soldiers that we're going to have that are just being put out there without a stated reason, without a purpose. And unfortunately, there's going to be family members, back in Fort Bragg, where my parents still live, who are going to have loved ones who do not come back from this, and it's for why, for what reason, and that is somebody will have to answer to that, and it's just a shame that we're finding ourselves in this situation.
Mike?
At State Department, I worked on the team I worked with the team that created the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was the Kerry/Obama era 2014-2015 agreement, which would have taken nuclear weapons out of Iran's hands for well over 15 years and opened their economy to American companies, including Boeing, who had, if I remember correctly, 24 planes ordered. The Iranians had ordered 24 planes from Boeing at the moment that the Trump administration the previous administration crumpled up the JCPOA simply because the Obama team had done it. Had we allowed that agreement to continue, which by the way was an agreement between Russia, China, the United States, France, the UK, and Iran. So this was a wide agreement among many people that we don't normally associate with, and the Trump administration crumpled it up. That's why we're there today. I was also in the room when we tried to go for Iran last time. And I just want to say this bit to make sure you're all aware. The way it works is they being the administration, will send a message out to all of our intelligence assets worldwide and tell them that we need everything they know about Iran, whether it's true, whether it's not, whether they heard it at a party, and they will send that back to us. And then we will go through that in Washington and look for the things that we can use in order to bring them forward and justify the war that we already began. We did that with Iraq the second time, and I'm sure we're going to do it here as well. So whatever the administration rolls out for you, know that was manufactured to do one of two things: either to distract you or pacify you for why we needed to go into Iran, and the second bit is distract you from the fact that our government is run by octogenarian billionaire pedophiles. Unfortunately, this seems to be true. And that is being dealt with in many other places, but not dealt with in America. And it's very difficult to deal with it when, reality is flailing toward you and you're just trying to get through the day. My goal in Congress is not to lose sight of that. My goal in Congress is to bring justice forward for not just Americans, but the people at the top of the leadership as well. I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to stay right with you there, Mike, with the next question. Democrats recently refused to renew the DHS budget without 10 reforms to ICE. What are your thoughts on those 10 reforms? Your thoughts on budget showdowns in general, and this one in particular?
So this one is the only one that I support. Every other budget failure is a failure of your government to govern. And when they fail to govern, they should feel consequences too. They should not get a paycheck. It should trigger immediate re-election immediate election again for every member of Congress, as it does in other countries. It is a failure to govern, and we hire them to govern. This particular incident is, obviously I was motivated into this by Department of Homeland Security, and one of the things that made me so angry, just one, is that Brian, our current congressman, voted for a bill, the big beautiful bill, that includes $75 billion for ICE, which immediately makes it the largest federal agency in the country. It's going to give you all an ICE outpost in every community, your friendly neighborhood field ICE office. They are going to be outfitted with surveillance technology that comes from Palantir that connects the license plate readers on your car with with open source databases to identify you and eventually to use that information to chill your ability to oppose the government. So you oppose the government, you're going to wind up with a black SUV outside your car. I 100% guarantee that's coming. And $40 billion with a B, for new warehouses to house people. By the way, folks, if you've ever paid attention to the federal government, two things are true. Once you create a pipeline that big, it will continue to run. And once we run out of immigrants, it's going to come for somebody else. Those $30 billion worth of ICE agents are not going to go home. They're just going to start arresting other people. The other thing that's true is you get results from the things that you fund. If you put $75 billion into an agency that is essentially existing to tear away your civil rights, invade your privacy, and intimidate you, there is no $75 billion that's going out for to bolster civil liberties in this country, to speak for the other side of it. So if you're splashing that down over here, it's going to have an effect elsewhere. Sorry, I'm again a little livid about this, but that's what got me into the race. Brian voted for it, and I don't see anybody that I on the ballot that I trust to go to Washington, understand the size of this privacy issue, and fix it.
Okay, thank you. Lucia, we're gonna go to you.
Sure. I think it merits that anger, Mike. I think this is worth a government shutdown. I think other things were worth it too, though, frankly. I think a government shutdown's not effective unless you stick to it. So I hope that the Democrats don't do what they did with the ACA subsidies and they actually see it through. Some of the reforms are important. No masks, body cams, things with respect to training. I still find it hard because I don't think that something like ICE can be reformed. So it also feels like just not enough. And I think we need to get rid of ICE. I think it should be defunded entirely. And not because I don't think we need a secure border or a safe immigration process. I think because ICE is not enabling that. It is making this country more dangerous for everyone. And the billions and billions of dollars that are going to ICE need to go to things like technology and infrastructure and personnel in our border. They needs to go to creating an asylum process that is well resourced to process people humanely and in a timely way, to actually have retention centers and integration opportunities for migrants. So yes, I think the reforms are probably an artifact of this moment that might be achievable given the public mandate and the power dynamics in Congress, but I am just personally frustrated that that's where we are, because I think we need a lot more than reformation here.
Thanks. We'll go to Tom next.
So this is an opportunity, I think, for us to look very carefully at why Brian Fitzpatrick has been reelected 5 times, elected and reelected. Brian is extremely dexterous at being able to walk a line that allows him to come across to voters in this district as someone who is thoughtful, careful, reasonable, moderate, and bipartisan. And it is frustrating to see how actively he does it. What is true today is that the Republican Party is going to give him a lot of leeway. But what Brian said to Bloomberg News recently was exactly what the Democrats are asking for. Brian said, look, these guys got to take off their masks. They need better training. You can't have Border Patrol agents being brought up and doing crowd control in urban areas. He listed almost exactly what the Democrats have said has got to be done. And he's given a lot of leeway because the Republicans view him as a critical person that they need to reelect. And he will continue to do that and continue to walk that line in everything he says. And what I found so frustrating is that Brian will say things over here and be able to point to them later, but the people who are out there that still vote for him will always find a sentence that they like somewhere that he has said in the 25 different things he said, and they're still going to vote for him. So I think we have not come up with a strategy to beat him, and unfortunately in this situation, as much as I totally agree that ICE, throw a wand across it, ICE needs to disappear. The behavior of a notion of a private masked army in the United States is just unbelievable. It boggles my mind every morning that I get up and say, there's a private army that has more money than they even know how to spend, no training. And Brian Fitzpatrick has walked that line, and it is something that we need to be totally aware of in any campaign against him, is that he will continue to do that, and we need to be armed with data and information and try to finally convince people this man says whatever he needs to in order to have people have one sentence they hang on to and reelect him again. It just can't happen.
Thanks, Tom. Tracy.
Yeah, thank you. So I think unfortunately we are at a point where we have to let this shutdown continue, and I agree with the fellow panelists that at this point we can't. I don't think, you know, the Congress people that are holding it up to. I think they should hold the line. Don't give in like they did last time. Unfortunately, this was an avoidable problem, but it is a byproduct of what I feel is the continued ineffectiveness and incompetence of our elected leaders. And again, establishment career politicians who just continue to do those same type of decision making. They could have addressed this, and one of the ways that I would approach this is that I know they have their 10 items, right? But again, as lawmakers, you have the opportunity to revisit and rewrite and revise statutes and regulations that govern ICE. They fall under their oversight, and you can monitor that and control that. That ship sailed, right? They had multiple opportunities to do it, and one of the other areas where they failed miserably is they should have pushed back well before the big bill. I would support the ending of omnibus bills that allow for this kind of funding to happen and these kind of things to be passed. It's 800 pages, right, of a lot of print with 72 hours to vote on it. And that's one of the very first things I ever said when I spoke to any prospective voters when I got in this campaign, which is, I can promise you this: if an 800-page bill lands on my desk with 72 hours to vote on it, could put me down for a no. Just put me down for a no right now. It could be the best, bill that's ever been written. It's a no if I do not understand all aspects of it. And there were countless legislators that came out publicly and stated they didn't know some of the stuff that was in that. That is insane. That is malpractice, right? To be voting something forward that you know nothing about. So from my perspective, they could have addressed a lot of these type of concerns early on by not getting on board with getting this omnibus bill passed, which takes us to the comments about Bryant, right? And his effectiveness of coming back here to the district and trying to sell people on his decision making. And I've been saying this since I got into the race as well, which is preaching to the Democrats in the room, right? We all know that he voted for the bill when it didn't matter, and so he voted no. He voted yes to bring it up to the Senate, but then when he came down, he voted no because he knew it was going to pass anyway. Everybody knows that. Every Democrat knows that. My campaign and what my focus has been, I believe this election is won on the 85,000 independent voters that voted in 2024 in Bucks County. 20% of the voters, that will take care of it. 20%, that's the election. And they need to call out Bryant. And you do it by saying the things that he could have done but didn't. So for example, he didn't go on a single cable news channel to talk about how bad that bill was. He could have. Every one of those channels would have taken it, and he never went on there.
Thanks, Tracy. All right. I think I heard from everybody on that question, right? Everybody got that one. All right, good. Recently, the Supreme Court and the Trump administration severely limited the EPA's authority to interpret and enforce the 1970 Clean Air Act. At the same time, there are a lot of businesses and industry here in Bucks County that does emit a good bit of greenhouse gases. What are your thoughts on that development, and what do you propose as a realistic solution to these actions that are taken by the judicial and executive branch? Bishop, we'll go first.
I think this is devastating as someone who has worked for the past 7 years on federal climate and energy policy. This is near and dear to my heart. I think what is important also to understand about the rollbacks and the executive orders and the actions of the EPA right now are that they are not just trying to block federal regulations, they are also trying to restrict actions of states and local governments with respect to the amount of regulation or climate action they take. So this is a pervasive effort to deregulate and to push an agenda. And I would say, remarkably, it's very anti-capitalist because they are not letting the market work, because the cheapest forms of energy are actually the cleanest forms of energy. So we are subsidizing and we are subsidizing the dirty and affordable and expensive ones. So this is clearly motivated by special interests. This has been decades and decades in the making. The fossil fuel companies have influenced politics disproportionately through dark money and front groups using the same strategy that the tobacco industry used. And here we are. So I think that the part about economic opportunities or impacts, even locally, is an important question. And I think it really takes a global perspective to understand that this is actually bad for us. This is not good for domestic competitiveness, even if in the short term it might look like it. And it's not because other countries are cleaning up their act. China is leading on clean energy. If we want to be competitive, we need to look at what China's doing. The EU is about to very soon roll out its carbon border adjustment mechanism. What does this do? It means that it will tax things based on carbon intensity of a product. So how dirty is your product? It will be more expensive to import. That cripples US manufacturing. If you care about steel in America, if you care about aluminum in America, if you care about industry in America and jobs in America, then we need to embrace clean technologies in order to be competitive on an international market. Right now, we are going to lose our foothold entirely. This is also true for energy infrastructure and energy sources and the technology behind that. So this is disruptive to our economy. This is not a question of just morality even. So what is being done is very short term. It's dangerous to public health. It's dangerous to our the well-being of future generations. We are seeing that the consequences of climate change are dangerous but also expensive with flooding and wildfires, sea level rise, the frequency of extreme weather events. So
20 seconds.
Okay, I could go on, but yeah, this is really problematic.
Thank you. I'm going to jump over the fellows in the middle and go to Tracy next on this one.
Okay, great. So I think that deregulation and lobbying, right, are going hand in hand. I believe, broadly speaking, I'll get to the environmental piece, but broadly speaking, this administration's desire to deregulate as much as they can to the benefit of big business and lobbying groups is undermining, the confidence in the people. I think it does undermine the economy ultimately for short-term gains or what appear to be, but it avoids innovation, it avoids new technologies, it tries to continue to support it's literally what the establishment in the politics does, but he's just doing it on a corporate level because that's how this administration thinks. So I think deregulation has been a harmful tool, and I actually embrace the federal government in getting more involved in regulating various types of utilities and environmental concerns as well. But I believe you have to attack the lobbying arm of this as well, because that's where the fossil fuel, that's why we're still talking so much about fossil fuel, right? Because they work really hard to keep that front and center. So I think those two are interconnected pieces. So as to the environmental piece, I agree. Look, I think these rollbacks are harmful. I understand that it can have some impact locally, but I think it's pretty hard to say that our environment, I don't believe there's a lot of people who believe, other than the large corporations, that our Environmental Protection Agency and the Clean Air Act or Clean Water Act or any of these, even with their enforcement provisions, were draconian in any way, shape, or form. There was still a lot of violations that happened. There were still a lot of companies that pushed the limits on things. So I think you can be a profitable and successful company staying within what our original, where they were before this rollback occurred. I think the rollback is going to cause way more harm in the long run, and it's going to end up costing all of us a lot more, rather than forcing some of these industries to comply, and maybe they have to cut into their profits a little bit in order to comply, but embrace new technologies, catch up, and survive, or don't and die. That's how the rest of us have to live our lives. So they shouldn't be able to lobby their way into continuing to exist when they're obsolete.
Thanks. We'll go to Tom next.
Yeah, so there's a very interesting concept called the tragedy of the commons. The tragedy of commons works this way, that you imagine a whole bunch of shepherds and there's a big common land, and they have to ultimately agree that they're only going to eat the amount of grass that grows in a day, because if they don't, eventually there's no grass at all. But individually, everybody has an incentive to say at midnight, let me take my sheep out there and let them get a little more grass, and nobody else will do it, and we're going to be fine. No one's going to notice that I took a little more than my share. And so what happens with the environment is that we have a common land. We have a common set of environmental resources. And what's happened in this country is that eventually, it's hard to remember, but Richard Nixon, a Republican, started the Environmental Protection Agency because finally people realized, I'm in Los Angeles and I can't breathe. And every individual person that wants to put out a little bit more carbon monoxide out of their car, they don't want to have to be facing these rules and regulations. The fact is, nations recognize, governments need to recognize, that the tragedy of commons is always at work. You can only take the number of fish that mature in a day, because eventually you won't have any fish. So we have got to use the Environmental Protection Agency to trust experts who know what they're talking about, as opposed to trusting congressmen who don't know anything about the science that they're regulating, and get them to actually stand up and say, look, this is what, unless we follow these rules, we are right back to violating and embracing the tragedy of the commons. It happens over and over again in world history. We finally realized with the creation of the EPA, with a Republican president, that you know what, there is a common land, there are common resources, and we need to trust the EPA to do their work. And the notion that we're going to take away all the restraints and the shepherds can go out and feed their sheep at midnight and there won't be any consequences is, again, a fool's errand. We've got to reinstate the EPA with all the resources that they need to protect our commons.
Thanks. Mike, next.
For me, this issue highlights a few different things that are sort of pervasive across policy issues and areas in our politics. The first one is that billionaires set the rules. They set the rules for taxation, they set the rules for how the government runs, and they set the rules for this EPA bill as well. As others have pointed out, the only constituency for destroying the environment is someone wanting to earn a capitalist dollar. It's not generally the folks who live in communities and neighborhoods who live inside of the context. And the other thing that this gutting of the EPA does is it forgives corporations' failure to modernize. In order for the United States to compete with China and other countries, we also need to modernize our industries. And that doesn't have to mean cutting into revenue for companies that produce fossil fuel or byproducts, carbon byproducts. That modernization is part of their survival. And we are interrupting that process by forgiving the need for them to undertake it. And the third part of this is, for me, it is disconnected from politics. The local folks, I guarantee local folks in Bucks County would support the EPA stringent application of EPA priorities to this region, because it's so beautiful, because they want to preserve farmland, the air, the quality of the water, the Delaware River, the birds, the wildlife. That they don't have that choice, because the voters don't actually pick their candidates. And the candidates are selected by a sort of political class, and they get to be the ones who appear on the ballot. And you don't get to know what any of their positions are on EPA or anything until it's too late, until you're coming up on the voting booth and you're like, why do I only have one option? And why do they both support unrestricted funding for Israel? Well, it's because our politics are separated from the people. And for me, that allows the billionaires to do things like gut the EPA, while folks every day wonder why their drinking water can't be drank, or the air isn't as clean as it used to be, or things around them are changing. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I make one very short?
Yeah, you can take a minute.
I think it's really interesting to note that when there was a pipeline leak in Bucks County, Brian Fitzpatrick's first reaction was to say, well, this is awful that it happened. And then his next reaction was to present a bill, if it passed, It would prevent leaks like that from happening through better regulation, more careful documentation, better construction techniques. So it's a good example that when something goes wrong, the natural and reasonable result is to try to propose a regulation to be sure it doesn't happen again. And that's how the EPA operates. I lived in Ambler for 30 years. That was a Superfund site from asbestos. And we've got to have an organization that allows us in the government to take care of problems, and as Brian Fitzpatrick did, propose new regulations when a new disaster occurs.
Thank you. All right. The next question is going to be for Tracy to answer first. It might be worth mentioning. So Donald Trump won Bucks County by about 350 votes, an election where 100,000 people voted. So in this moment in our political world, is there still room for bipartisanship? And if so, are there any stances that you can point out that you have that are more Republican than Democrat? Tracy?
Well, John, it's interesting that I'm the first one to get there. So, for those that are not aware, prior to getting into this race, at some point around June of last year, I changed parties from Republican to Democrat. I will qualify that in saying that I have never been overtly political. I was never party aligned. I never campaigned or canvassed or was a committee member of any kind. I registered 27 years ago, and from that point forward, when I got in, the beauty, and I say this all the time, the beauty of our democracy is that when I got into the voting booth, for all those 27 years as a Republican, I could vote for whoever the hell I wanted to, and I did. And I voted for Obama twice, and I voted for Republicans, I voted for Democrats, I voted for who I thought was the best person for the office, who resonated with me the most, who I connected with, who I thought would do the best job, right? So, and I believe that to this day, even running as a Democrat. I'm not a vote blue no matter who, right? If there is a better candidate, including if it would be a Republican, although it's in this current environment, that's a big stretch and that's a big ask, I think. But I believe you vote for the person, not the party, and I've always believed that. So that being said, I do believe, again, a big part of me getting involved is the level of divisiveness. It is off the charts. It's been escalating. I think there's always been a level of divisiveness in politics, but the last 10 years has been a whole nother level. And now it's permeated into our personal interactions with people, right? People are just meaner to one another, and there's a lot of this divisiveness. And again, I'm going to turn it back to career politicians aren't doing anything. In fact, I actually would argue that the establishment parties are thriving on the divisiveness. They want this. I'll give you the example, and I went to a lot of committee meetings leading up to this. I've reached out, as all of us have. We reached out to the local Democratic committees and asked them to let us in. I got into about 9 of them. A lot of them didn't return my invite. They never wanted me in there. But the ones I did go into, the establishment candidate that has been endorsed by the Bucks County Democrats was at those meetings. At least the last 7 of mine, he was there. And he repeated the same thing over and over again about the program that he's most proud of. It's called the Co-Responders Program here in Bucks County. And I know about this program, and he would talk about it. And it's where the police take a social worker with them on a domestic call, right? Because police aren't equipped necessarily to deal with domestic situations. The social worker is, it can de-escalate, right? And it's designed to keep things from going off the rails. And he talks about this program a lot. And the last time I was in a Democratic committee room, he said that might be his flagship moment as a commissioner. And he said, it started in 1 township, and we now have it in 30 townships. And it's a model for the Commonwealth. And I'm sitting there going, you're gonna say the township it started in, aren't you? But he doesn't. I'll tell you the township. It was Bensalem Township. Anybody want to take a guess who the director of public safety was when that program started in Bensalem? It was a Republican sheriff that a lot of people in this county hate. But he started that program. He actually started it. And he got Diane Marseglia to help fund it so they could have a social worker paid for by the county. And he helped Diane and then Bob. Bob voted to fund it. But he's the one that helped those other 30 municipalities put it in practice. So the reason I bring this up is because This is an easy one. This is
20
low-hanging fruit. This is low-hanging fruit. He could have been like, listen, I have nothing in common with this guy. I don't see eye to eye on anything with him. But you know what? This was a good program, and I am glad that a Republican and a Democrat could come together and come up with a program that's good for the community and better for the community, and that we can all feel good about. But he does it. He
Thank
never
you.
does it.
Thank you. We'll go to Mike next.
Thank you. I've thought a lot about this question of partisanship. When I was at State Department and with the military, you don't get to bring your politics abroad. When you're representing the United States officially abroad, the politics stay at shoreline. And I represented the Trump administration abroad. That was hard. Particularly when the United States normally can talk about election safety, supporting democracy, and as his last administration continued, those became harder and harder for the United States to credibly talk about. Nonetheless, I think actually there are three political parties that we're dealing with at the moment. I think in this county, you have a Republican Party. I think you have a Democrat Party that looks and smells a lot like moderate Republicans. And I think there's a section of this county that are progressive and liberal, but are not represented by the Democratic establishment. Because the Democratic establishment is convinced in this county that the only thing that can beat Brian is a carbon copy of Brian, like slightly softer. Your question about bipartisanship is an important one. I want to be bipartisan, but I want to be honest with you all too. I'm not in a bipartisan mood. I think that on a normal year, your establishment candidate would actually be a very good candidate. I think in a normal year, he would go to Washington and make friends with people and seek bipartisanship. But I think that if he does that now, he's gonna have to trade away your rights. He's gonna have to trade away money that should help you and your children build your lives and chase your American dream. And those aren't things that I'm willing to compromise on. So when I go to Washington, I am not going to compromise on election integrity or democracy or protecting the privacy of Americans from federal intrusion. And I'm not going to compromise on bringing money back to local communities to help them. People can't afford their health care, but we have $75 billion for ICE. People can't afford housing, but we have no competent plan for how to get people into a first-time home, which, by the way, is how you build wealth in America. There's a million ways I could go with this, but we can no longer compromise until we establish firmly the foundation. And that foundation at the moment is quite weak. And the last thing I'll say on this is I think there's actually quite an opportunity here, because I want to build an America from the ashes of what we have now that reflects the will of the people who live in that context. Those of us who are going to be here for another 40, 60, 80 years, and we should be the ones deciding what is normal between our country and our people. And at the moment, we are not. Folks who are not going to live in this context for much longer are the ones dragging us around.
Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna jump over Tom real quick and go to Lucia.
Okay, I'm gonna say four things. I think that I agree with Republicans on more than might be expected. One is fiscal responsibility. I think there is waste, fraud, and abuse, and we need to find that and eliminate it, and I would start in the Pentagon. The second thing is we do need to cut unnecessary red tape and regulation. And for example, permitting reform for clean energy projects. So I believe in energy dominance and cutting red tape. I think we agree on this. The third is I agree on promoting small businesses and reducing the burdens for small businesses. A big burden for small businesses is health insurance. So I believe in Medicare for all so that small businesses could be more profitable. And what is the last thing? I said I had a fourth. Oh yes, I am working right now on legislation at the federal level that brings together farmers and people interested in climate. So I agree with Republicans a lot on supporting farmers and also making America healthy. So I think regenerative practices that also ensure that farming and agriculture is resilient is something that we can all agree upon.
Tom?
So I love the idea of Lucia actually going up to Republican and calling them to back up and act on what they say they want to do. In fact, I come from probably the oldest Republican family in the country. My grandfather's grandfather helped Lincoln get nominated in 1860. My grandfather's brother was a senator from Ohio known as Mr. Republican. And every single person in my generation is an avid, lifelong Democrat. The problem with the Republican Party is that it disappeared. It doesn't exist anymore. And when I talk to people about trying to work with the Republican Party and say, you know what, it's a little bit like asking Neil deGrasse Tyson, the famous astrophysicist, to sit down and come up with a nice bipartisan proposal with Bob from the Flat Earth Society. It is no longer possible, in my mind, to treat Republicans honestly and think that they're going to actually come up with a plan that is reasonable and thoughtful and honest and thorough. Bipartisanship, I do love the idea of Lucia calling Republicans out and having them to actually stand up. So yes, I support that and support that. But the fact is, they are very difficult to deal with because they have all sold their souls. That this is no longer a Republican Party that anybody can stand up for and say, you know what, let me see what I can work out with you. And let me give a very interesting example. Brian Fitzpatrick pushes this idea of being a member of or leading the Problem Solvers Caucus. He's the one that's going to work together on a bipartisan basis and we're going to solve problems. So he sent me this nice long letter about the fact that he wrote a letter with Tom Suozzi, who was his Republican counterpart, and his Democratic counterpart, and they wrote a letter to Donald Trump. They said, hey, Donald Trump, here's how you have to revamp ICE. You've got to do this and this and this. So we want you to meet with us and talk with us. So Brian gets credit for being problem solver. He writes the letter, and Trump doesn't have the meeting. So he's never talked to them. They write the letter. They advertise it. I'm sorry, I cannot see a single thing, except on a local level, where people actually work out common problems, Republican or Democrat, to address a visible issue on a local level. But on the national level, I can't trust a single Republican to do anything that's noble, right, good, or kind.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask about the First Amendment and free speech. What can be done to protect free speech in America? And I'll start with Tom.
And so this whole issue of free speech is really important to me. I'm really upset when conservative people want to come to a university in America and don't get a fair chance to express their viewpoints, their ideas. It is really upsetting to me that there's any restriction on free speech, that people are intimidated not to be able to speak or express their minds, that a number of students at colleges say, well, you know what, I have to sort of keep my mouth shut because there's such a push on one direction in the political spectrum. So I would do everything I could as a member of Congress to try to be sure that we go back to establishing the fact and make it clear to students, to young people, to everyone in this country, the reason we are where we are, the reason this is a great experiment in democracy that's lasted for 250 years is that free speech is at the absolute bedrock of all the rights we have as Americans. And so I never want anyone to feel like I can't speak my mind because I'm intimidated by whatever group I'm in, either whether it's conservative or progressive. Free speech has got to be free speech. It's got to be recognized. It's got to be respected. And I don't care what you are on the political spectrum, you have to be willing to be quiet and listen to someone else express an opposing point of view. Because at the end of the day, when people say, I'm going to go to Congress and fight for you, I'm going to go to Congress and persuade people, but I'm only going to be able to persuade them after I've listened to what their point of view is, understand it, and then try to go back to them and say, you know what, you need a different point of view, and here's why I think. Unless we have conversations, we can't have free speech, and we can't resolve problems.
Thanks. We'll go to Mike next.
Yeah, folks, the First Amendment's under attack. I don't think effectively the First Amendment really operates anymore the way it was intended. I see the 75 billion for ICE not as 75 billion invested in law enforcement or invested in immigration. That is 75 billion invested in intimidation. It is 75 billion invested in fixing the president's problem with people who oppose him. And part of how ICE will intimidate you is by seizing your First Amendment rights, by chilling your ability to express yourself in public. Feeling, for instance, if you show up for a protest and when you return home, there's a black SUV parked outside of your house. That is real, that happens, and it's only going to get worse unless we take steps now to firm up our foundation when it comes to free speech. Part of what I said earlier, is true, with 75 billion for ICE, it is meant to have a chilling effect on free speech. There is no similar $75 billion investment in the First Amendment. And the way Congress and the way government works, if you don't put money toward it, it doesn't happen, right? If you put money toward creating an agency whose job is to intimidate American citizens without creating some other mechanism and funding some other mechanism that will bolster Americans' freedoms, a very predictable thing will happen. So to answer your question, what can be done, immediately my brain goes to education. The children and people who are in school now need to understand what their rights are, what their responsibilities are, and what their role is in ensuring that their society is the one that they want to live in. And I think that the federal government can make that investment quite easily if it wanted to. It's a policy choice. Good.
Thank you. We'll go to Tracy next.
So, for where Mike's coming from, I mean, the First Amendment is a foundational piece of our country. It needs to be protected. It needs to be, honored, and we shouldn't be limiting what people are able to say. That being said, it is also very old and antiquated, and when it was written, there were a lot of other aspects of society and civility that didn't exist. While I certainly agree, everybody has a right to protest, they have a right to speak their mind, and to be able to shout out what they don't like about ICE or what they don't like about their government doing things. I do think as we have advanced as a society, we have people pushing the limits, right? And I think it's worth potentially revisiting, when we start talking about inciting stuff, and inciting people to harm other people or to commit crimes. And those are exceptions, those are carve-outs, but they're not being pursued. They're some of the vile stuff that Charlie Kirk talked about, right? A lot of it was protected free speech. In my opinion, it wasn't all protected free speech, right? And I think when you start inciting stuff and you use social media and the internet to also do that, and to be able to just hide behind the First Amendment, I don't agree with that. I think that is where our antiquated system, and it's not just with regards to the First Amendment. I mean, we evolve as a country, and what our forefathers had in mind was amazing, and they did an amazing job, but it didn't account for 2026 or 2025. And I think we have to be willing as legislators or lawmakers to look at that, or to at least enact directions to the court, because again, we are three co-equal branches, and the court will interpret statutes that deal with what constitutes insightful free speech, right? Or insightful speech in general that creates violence against other people. So it's a layered approach. It's not the First Amendment just standing by itself. There's a lot of other aspects of our everyday life that I think impact that and how it should be applied.
Thank you. Bashir?
Yeah, I think the First Amendment is a piece of our democracy. So if we want to protect the First Amendment, we have to protect a healthy democracy. Otherwise, we're just sort of trying to patchwork some solutions that don't get at the problems that are really dismantling our institutions. So I think preserving the First Amendment is inextricably linked to things like getting money out of elections. It's also about, tax reform. It's about rules that will work against the concentration of wealth and power that have led us here. It is about trying to enforce a culture or arrive at a culture of tolerance, to understand that systemic racism exists and trying to address that honestly. These are all things that I think are foundational to protecting the First Amendment. I'm gonna stop there.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mike's gonna get the next question. Let's take a little hypothetical flight of fancy here. We're in January, and you're in the Congress.
Yep.
Give me the 3 congressional U.S. House committees that you're gonna sit on.
All right. Well, Brian has a seat on intelligence, and I want to keep that seat. So I think it's important that this county be represented on that seat. And ways and means and rules. I'm thinking about process here, and actually. Process for a moment, just to go back to the last question. I know we've moved on from it, but the last question was about free speech, and there was just one aspect that I wanted to touch on, which was mis and disinformation, just because it's something that I've worked in before, and I believe that a lot of what we're dealing with today is the output of foreign powers manipulating our media and the things that we see on social media and traditional media. And that is going to be a pernicious challenge to deal with going forward, particularly in a legislative space. It's difficult to separate free speech from speech that is intended by a foreign power to manipulate a population toward or away from a certain thing. And that's a difficult thing to take apart. But to answer your question now, I think that for me is part of why I think it's very important to be on the Intelligence Committee, to have oversight over what's happening both in public and what's happening behind closed doors with our intelligence system. I have very strong concerns about what's being done with regard to privacy, and the other 2 would be focusing on resources and process in order to manipulate outcomes in other parts of the organization without having to sit directly on those boards.
Thank you. We'll go to Gia next.
Yeah, so number 1, Oversight Committee. I am thinking optimistically it's January and the Democrats have a House majority, which means that they can more actively pursue their duty of oversight, which will be necessary to curb what is happening across the agency. So I think that committee will be a really important one, and one that will come in also with a mandate to do so. I think second is Ways and Means as well, but maybe for a different reason, which is that I think whoever wins will also be winning on a mandate of doing something about healthcare, and that's a committee that has jurisdiction over healthcare reform. And then the third I would say is I would like to be on some appropriations subcommittee, because especially when you have tight margins and likely not the Senate, I think appropriations will pass. That is a place where you can make great change by funding programs that exist and that are publicly very, you will have the support to do so. If I could pick my pet appropriations subcommittee, it will be the one for the legislative branch, which is very niche, but it is because there's an opportunity to fund, to the point that Mike made about information and especially AI right now and some of the regulatory things that we need to bring back some of the agency and the institutional capacity for science and technology expertise within the legislative branch that has been dismantled, and that could easily be reinstituted because it still exists in statute. And so I would really like to refund those agencies so that we are able to counteract all of the external money and lobbyists with internal expertise to make real decisions about how we create policy for emerging science and technology that is unregulated, a real threat to us right now.
We'll jump down to Tracy.
So, consistent with what I've been talking about tonight, this is the job of the lawmaker, right? One of the areas that Congress has given away is that lawmaking ability, as well as the ability to control the budget. So, and again, I believe in the co-equal branches. And so, for me, it would be appropriations, or some subcommittee of appropriations, oversight, for the reasons that have already been stated here, and obviously as an attorney, I have some real concerns about our Supreme Court, and so I would want to be on the judiciary. That would probably be the third. I believe the politicization of our federal court system needs to be addressed. I don't know that there's an easy solution to it, but it does need to be addressed. These lifetime appointments, the inability of these nominees to avoid answering questions that they should be able to answer to show where they're coming from, where their stances are, what their beliefs are. You're getting a lifetime appointment. I don't think you get to avoid that question. I think you have to answer it. So that would be an important committee to me as well, but those would be the three.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, so intelligence. It strikes me that it's critical for us to really be able, as Congress members, to understand exactly what's going on in the background. Again, I alluded to the fact that Allende was overthrown by the CIA, Iran was overthrown by the CIA. Understanding what's going on in intelligence is critical. At the same time, my great-grandfather was a Supreme Court Chief Justice, and so I would love to be on the judiciary because I have the exact same concern that there's a strange thing that's happened in this country that we begin to identify judges by who they were nominated by. It seems to me we need to work extremely hard to get back to where we are looking for brilliant judicial minds that understand the Constitution, adhere to the Constitution, and don't just say it. So I think there's a possibility in the judiciary to actually have an impact on the judges who we appoint and make sure that they're actually appointed not because of their political views, but because of their understanding of the Constitution and how it plays out. And then I really want to have an impact on appropriations. It strikes me that we can reframe this budget. We have a country that's going into debt at the rate of $1 trillion every 71 days. It has got to be possible for us to reorient how we spend money, how it's allocated, and how it's appropriated. Those are the three committees I'd focus on.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Next, I want to talk about AI-powered data centers. First, I'm going to ask how you use AI, and then I want to mention that there's a proposal to build a data center right down up the river in Falls Township, spanning 247 acres over 2 million square feet. And I'm curious to your thoughts about the upsides and downsides of these data centers and what legislative protections might come in handy here. So first, your use of AI, and then thoughts on upsides and downsides of the centers and what protections would be in place. And I'm going to go first to Lucy.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I am actually pretty rigid with myself. I limit my use of AI as much as possible. If anyone uses the internet, you know it's impossible not to use AI at this point. It is sort of thrust upon you from every direction. So, that is a thing. So I'm aware of that. I really don't often use ChatGPT. If you go on my website, I drew my own little illustrations. I really try not to use it. I am also a scientist by training, and so I do understand that AI has potential for good. So I do want to say that there are instances where it will be beneficial to humanity, but it is not really being leveraged that way. And in particular, the data centers that are being built are not for that societal benefit. They're for big tech profits. They're for these kind of trivial things that they are pushing in every app, in every browser, in everything that you use. And so I think there are more downsides than upsides right now to the rush to build these data centers around the country, around the state, and now in our county. In particular, because there are not those codified preconditions in place before they're being built. So we don't understand the full scope of environmental impacts from energy use to water use. We don't fully understand how they affect utility prices, right? Like, we are on a massive grid that includes Virginia, the state with the most data centers. We have seen utility costs spike. These are huge loads that are added to the grid all at once when we're already dealing with outdated transmission infrastructure, and we don't have all of the ways to build new energy sources. They're pushing dirty energy sources like new natural gas plants on us that bake us into that fossil fuel reliance for decades in the future. And we don't have the regulation for AI to understand how it should be used in a responsible way. So I think sometimes it's also under the guise of national security. And I would argue that for national security, we should look to how China does things, which is in a centralized way. If we're really concerned about doing this for the nation, for society, then data centers are more efficient when they're coordinated and centralized. These are all data centers for different tech companies that are competing against each other, and that is why they are being pushed into our communities. So what I am in favor of is putting a pause on this and understanding what conditions we need in place so that communities don't bear the burden of these efforts, like who is going to bear the cost of additional transmission infrastructure or energy projects? What type of energy should these projects be forced to use? We need full transparency for the environmental impact before we move forward. And lastly, I would say one upside in a short term is they don't bring many permanent jobs. They do bring many short-term construction jobs, which are important. I don't think you lose those
10 seconds.
if you have preconditions that are requiring other infrastructure to be built first. So you can still keep those jobs, but do it in a more responsible way in the right chronology.
Thanks. Tom?
It really is shocking that most of the stock market today is driven by very few companies, and most of it is connected with AI development. This is truly, in my lifetime, one of those places where you say, how far did the cart get ahead of the horse? This is one of those situations where it seems to me, I agree firmly with Lucia, that we've got to somehow put a stop on this. People are racing forward so fast with no regulation, no understanding of the consequences, no understanding even of the short or long-term consequences, and it is really hard to stop an onrushing force that's come as fast as AI has, and with so much of the stock market tied to AI valuations. So I don't know how it's possible. I don't know how you can magically wave a wand, but it's got to be in the next Congress, there's got to be a total focus, especially if the Democrats take charge, in figuring out a way to slow this train down, because we haven't understood any of the consequences, everything that Lucia mentioned in terms of the grid transmission, the cost, how do you generate this much electricity, how do you handle it, and how do you put these data centers in communities that aren't really ready to take them somehow, and I don't have a magic answer to this, but somehow we've got to stop and slow down the AI development, because it's rushing way out ahead of where the nation is, where the people are, what they actually need. So many of the advertisements for AI are for things that are just frivolous, they're not substantive. And I couldn't agree more that AI has to be under a realm where you are controlled, where there's centralization, where there's understanding who's doing what, as opposed to a free-for-all or rodeo out west where you're trying to see who can ride the bronco the longest and make the most money. It's actually really, really frightening. It seems to me it's a sort of core issue to the existential issue of our time in this nation.
Mike, you're next.
I use AI all the time. I think it atrophies part of my brain, and I'm aware of that. But it has enabled me to do a lot of things that I would not have otherwise been able to do, many related to this campaign. And so it's a tool, and I need to make all the tools available to myself. On the AI data centers, this is fundamentally a local issue for me, but there are roles for the federal government here in I think 3 areas. One is energy. As we've pointed out, these large load customers have an impact on the energy grid in a given country, a given region, and certainly here as well. As they add, all of the folks on that grid pay more. The Public Utility Commission in Pennsylvania is undertaking a process now which will address how those large load customers are billed with regard to the entire power grid. And they're gonna do it with an eye toward transparency. If I were in office, that's a state commission. I would stick my nose into that state commission to make sure that my territory, my district, is being represented fairly in that decision-making process. But that is where the responsibility lies with the Pennsylvania Utility Commission. The ecological impacts are also need to be studied, as we've talked about the EPA being gutted. Not a terrific time for ecology and studying ecological impacts. The third piece here is the little value that these centers add to the community. They don't bring a sense of neighborhood. They don't add value to a community, and they don't bring long-term, good-paying jobs. Just overall, I think a lot of thought needs to go into how local communities embrace these data centers and what negotiations they undertake to ensure that the data centers are contributing to the community in a meaningful way to offset their impact. And I think the role for the federal government there is in a grant system that supports that decision-making process. So you'll have communities all across America who are struggling with this same issue right now, Bucks and Montco being 2 of them. Let's get the federal government involved in creating a standard that states can adapt or adopt, and funding grants, the local governments to undertake that process, essentially enabling them. Thank you.
Tracy.
Sure. So I intersect with AI on actually a few different ways. Personally, I do use it on occasion. I'm not a heavy user of it. I've found it more supplemental to me, whether it's in writing or putting together a contract really quickly that I already have the basic knowledge of, but it's an efficiency thing. And I think it's a useful efficiency tool, and I don't think it's going away. So I'm embracing it and using it to that extent. It also intersects with me personally as a university professor, because I will tell you, for a lot of our college-age students who don't have years of wealth of experience and have had to learn, the original way and understand critical thinking, I do not like it because it is a hell of a crutch, and I am seeing the deterioration of critical thinking in the classroom, like semester by semester. It's insane. Just about a week ago, I think there is something now known as AI Einstein, and for those of you that have been around college atmospheres or something like that, there's a learning system known as Canvas, and it is used by a lot of high schools use it. It's used by almost all colleges. There is now an interface with AI Einstein and Canvas. And Canvas is the module that we use to put a lot of our assignments up there. The readings are up there, the homework's up there, the exams are up there. It will, for $500 a month, it will interface with Canvas, and they can take your syllabus and put it in there, and it will do the assignments on the date they're due. It will submit them. It will do the homework. It will do the exam. The student just programs in the schedule and checks out, and they are done for the semester, and it will do the rest of it. That is scary as hell to me, and it's really scary as a professor because I'm really concerned about what kind of working adults these folks are going to turn out to be, right? So I've intersected it on both those levels. As to the data centers, I agree with some of the sentiments going here. I believe this is where it crosses into regulation. I do believe in regulating this. I believe internet in general is a utility now and should be regulated as a utility. I don't think it is a luxury. I don't think AI is a luxury. It is going to be a utility if it's not already in many ways. So therefore it should be regulated, which means PUC should be getting involved in this. And PUC should actually be getting involved in it because although they are the regulatory body in Pennsylvania, they ain't doing a whole lot, right? And I think they need to step up what they do. And I would also support the ideas that, look, there's going to be environmental impacts and you should be, the government, federal government and state governments should be regulating these industries both from a consumption standpoint as well as their environmental impact. And because there's a lot we don't know. And until we know what that's going to be, I think these industries need to be held accountable and be on the hook and understand that they're going to be on the hook for this, whether it's an environmental problem that comes up or if it's causing other people's expenses to go up because of the drain on the grid, they're going to have to foot that bill. They're going to be profiting from it, so they're going to have to carry the heavy load on any increase in the cost.
Okay. Thanks, Tracy. We'll stay right with you for this question. To be a congressperson in the House of Representatives, you have to have leadership ability. Can you tell me about a time that you've been a leader, and what have you learned about leadership?
I've been I've felt like I've been a leader in a lot of different areas of my life. I'm trying to grab, I was as I've said, I'm a member of a union, the American Association of University Professors. I was their lead labor negotiator for 4 CBAs, so that's, some of them went past their expiration date, so that was somewhere between 12 and 15 years worth of CBAs, and I was the lead negotiator. And I had, 100 plus unionized faculty who relied on me as the lead negotiator. If you've been in a unionized setting, you understand the collective bargaining agreement deals with wages, hours, and working conditions. Those are really important things to every union member and the future is gonna hold for them, what their health care is going to be, are they gonna get a livable wage, are they gonna, and I'll be totally candid, there was friction in there at times because, as I've noted, I've continued to practice law here for 27 years, and a lot of the faculty understood that and did not think that I was, they're like, well, you're willing to take risk with us because you're going to be, you have your practice still. And I was negotiating for things like their healthcare that I wasn't even on. I wasn't on the healthcare program there. And at one point I wasn't even tenured and I was negotiating. So I was subject to being terminated without any further follow-up. So as in that capacity, I had to go to them and get them to buy in. I believe leadership is about buying in. Getting the people that you lead or that you represent have to know that you're coming at it with integrity and honesty, and and that you own up to it and you're accountable. And I believe that is woefully missing in our elected leaders, particularly accountability. And I held myself accountable to that union, and I took the bows and arrows that were shot at me, just as I've done for a number of Democrats who wanted to come at me because of my previous affiliation with the Republican Party. But I believe in leadership is you own it, you take accountability for it, and when you do that, people will, when they see that integrity, will follow and buy into what you're selling, and I think collectively then you can achieve things.
We'll go to Tom next.
So my family's been involved in leadership in this country in a lot of different ways, including my great-grandfather who was president. And for most of my life, we actually sat around the dinner table, and hard to believe, but we sat down every night together, the whole family, and issues inevitably came up about leadership. My father he was a county commissioner, and he said, you know, I could get almost anything done. He was a minority in the minority party of the county commissioners. I could get almost anything done as long as I was able to convince other people it was their idea. So I spent a long time in my life sort of getting notions of what leadership was, how it was involved, what was demanded of you. But in most of my life, in fact, I was a teacher, I was a carpenter. There weren't easy situations where you could exert leadership. What happened, though, in a strange twist in my life, is I went back to management school because I was building houses, and we wanted to break the back of inflation, and mortgage rates went up to 14-15%. I said, hey, I'm happy to be a carpenter. What's happening in my life is happening 3,000 miles away. So I went back to graduate school, and I came out as a public finance investment banker. Like, what is that about? I'm a carpenter and a teacher, and now I've convinced somebody that I'm an investment banker. So I come into a corporation, and I assume people know what they're doing. And pretty soon I realized I'm part of this subsidiary of this massive bank, and people are running around doing things. I said, you guys, how do you operate? How have you gotten anything done so far? So in the blink of an eye, I became the chief operating officer of the public finance subsidiary of First Interstate Bank, 60-story bank building in Los Angeles, because I just started to apply all the things that I learned my whole life around the dinner table, which is you listen to people, you try to understand what they need, you try to understand what you're trying to accomplish. I made a list of all the things that we did as a company, and everybody said, oh my God, that's amazing. No one's put that list together. I said, okay, well, here it is. Now, how do we manage this? How do we pull this together? So this was a real trial by fire, because I walked in the door and said, you know, guys, I am not an investment banker. And then I ended up in very short order being the chief operating officer, because the lessons of leadership have to do with listening carefully, understanding what the problem is, coming up with solutions, persuading people that in fact the path you're going under is one that you can follow. And really, I over and over again, I say leadership comes back to listening and persuasion, and that's what I've tried to do in my life, especially at First Interstate Bank. That was crazy.
Jane, you're next.
Yeah, I think I've had several different types of leadership roles in my life. I have a PhD in mathematics, and after that I taught for a time. So as an educator, I think one is a leader. I led the science policy portfolio for the senator I worked for. I am the director of a nonprofit right now, which is a leadership position, and I help to lead a local grassroots group in Upper Bucks County. And I'm running for office, which, as we all know, is a type of leadership position. We are the voice of a movement. We are the person that gets to speak on behalf of a larger group of people, and have the privilege of that responsibility. So I think through all of these experiences, I would echo some things that have been said. It's a lot about trust, a lot about listening. I would also say a lot about being prepared. Knowing what you don't know is important, and being honest about that. And one of the value set that I learned from one of the leaders I worked for, who I found to be very inspirational, was the values of curiosity and humility. And I think that that's something I carry with me, or try to carry with me in all of these roles.
All right, Mike?
Curiosity and humility. I love that. Thank you. This is the hardest leadership challenge that I have undertaken. And I've been in the military, I went to Iraq, State Department, was the director of crisis response. I've been in a lot of tough rooms, and this was the hardest. It was the hardest because I started this 4 weeks ago after Minnesota, and I had no intention of jumping into this. You were, that's right. And so I didn't have a ground team, and when I made this decision, I relied on my friends. And as I've gone through this journey, I've met so many people, and I didn't engage in this to consider myself a leader, to demonstrate leadership capability, but as folks invest their faith in you and tell you about the problems that are holding them back from living a joyful life, we all take on that responsibility and we want to perform for these folks. So for me, the looking my fellow citizens in the eye and telling them, you know, I hear you and understand you, and I can explain to you why things are the way they are. It's wrong. I know that. You know that. We all see it. And the only thing we can do is go and do our best and hope that that's enough. And that's a hard decision. It's easier to stay in bed and than it is to ask people to join you and run against an established system. So yeah, that's been the hardest. I will say though that at State Department, also quite a bit of leadership. The role there is to rally all of the government to get information for the secretary. If you're pulling people off of a Caribbean island because a hurricane is coming, the secretary needs to go to the podium and tell folks how many people we got off and how many planes we ran and how many we're gonna get off in the next 24 hours, because that's the only thing American citizens in Congress care about. And those numbers and that data, they came through me. And my job was to come into a room full of people who absolutely are risk adverse and did not want to give me their information and strong arm it out of all of them so that we could knit together an accurate and timely picture for the American people of what was being done with their money in their name around the world. I don't think we do that anymore. But it was a difficult job and another test of leadership.
Great, thank you.
John, can I make one very short positive comment about Mike and his campaign?
Sure, go ahead, Tom. In a minute.
So Lucia and I were there, we're at the Doylestown Dems meeting, and Lucia spoke, and then I spoke, and then the moderator said, sort of humorously, "Hey, anyone else want to run for Congress?" And this guy pops up. He said, "Yeah, you know what, I think I do." And I have to tell you that in the time we spent together, I feel like I've picked up a really good friend. This is a very dynamic, caring person who's in here for all the right reasons because he just cares so deeply. But it was wonderful watching that moment happen when Mike stood up and said, "You know, yeah, I'm going to run for Congress. Look out, here I come." It was a good experience to have.
And just to continue for a moment, the Love Fest, like Lucia and Tom were both there, and I had no idea what I was doing. But I had this passion and this fire, and I went to that meeting knowing that if I left having told a room full of Democrats that I wanted to be their congressman, I'd be locked into it, and it would happen. And I just want to point out, Lucia and Tom both came up to me after that meeting, and Lucia and Tom both said, "Welcome. There are others, we have a plan, and do you need any help?" And that is so unexpected and amazing, and so welcome. Your candidates up here are good people, and they work together, not across each other. And it's just, yeah, it's something worth pointing out that is really terrific. Thank you.
Okay. All right, guys, it is 8:18. I got one question left, then I'll bring us in for a landing. That kicking us off on this, the final question is Tom. So you'll start us here. The question is about term limits. Do you believe in them, and how many will you serve if elected?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question because Brian's brother Mike was a real advocate of term limits, and there's a movement now to say 3 terms is right amount. I do think the way Congress works is that there's a real value to institutional memory, and I'm really hesitant to have term limits. I believe in term limits, but I'm hesitant to have them be so short that you don't carry institutional memory from one Congress to the next. And so there's a movement to say, well, congressmen should only be in 3 terms. I don't think that's enough. But I do think that it's reasonable to say 6. And 6 terms gives you 12 years. It's an amount of time for you to understand how Congress works, to begin to have an impact, to begin to have people come to you and ask questions and you be able to provide answers. So I do believe in term limits. I don't think it should be as short as some groups are proposing. And I think 12 years is a good number of years. And and 6 terms is a good number.
Thanks, we'll go to Tracy next.
So I'll echo some of what Tom said. I believe in term limits as well. For me, it's probably the 10 number. Quite frankly, I actually would like to sort of somehow line up the Congress, you know, the House of Representatives and the Senate. I think 6-year terms in Senate is a lot. And I think they should be balanced in some way. So using Tom's 6 terms would be 12 years, or it'd be 2 terms in the Senate. I would be in that 10 to 12 range. I do believe in term limits. I think career politicians are what is wrong with our politics. They have been bred by these career, you know, the 2 political parties that do not care about the voters' input, despite what they say they do not. And they've got a factory going there, and they're cranking out these politicians, and they keep them in there for as long as they can. And I think that's what's undermining our government. I think that's what's ultimately undermining our democracy, and it's what's causing, you know, the American people to lose faith in our government. So we need to limit it on some level. I'd be comfortable supporting 10. I'd be comfortable supporting 12. I don't think I would be comfortable supporting anything beyond that, because I do agree that institutional memory, there is a value in that. So there has to be, you know, some continuation, but not past 12 years.
Thanks, Mike.
I'm going to give an unpopular answer and say that I don't initially support the idea of term limits, and here's why. I'm willing to explore this idea more and have my mind changed on it, but I would rather fix the problem at the ground level. I think term limits are a tool that we employ when we have politicians who are in a place for too long, and they generally get there because the politics that put them there are distorted. Their district is gerrymandered, and therefore, you know, they're going to appear on the ballot until they die. That's bad. The way I would prefer to fix it is fixing it at the ground level. Let's fix the gerrymandering so that each district is competitive. And let's make sure we're not doing things like we do here in Bucks, where the county party puts its thumb firmly on the scale to put its candidate onto the ballot to the exclusion of others. That's bad politics, separates people from their vote. And I think those are the reasons that people feel separated, corrupted. My gosh, the money, $7 million, 1% of it came from local donors, the rest came from APAC and corporations. Like, that is separating people from their vote. And that's the corruption of government. So I would rather fix people's impression of the federal government by performing better for them and making their politicians perform better for them.
Virginia?
Yeah, I think I'll give a hybrid answer. I would be in favor of term limits, but maybe a bit longer than was suggested. I agree with Mike, there are other problems to fix that could get rid of some of the sort of career politicians that we're frustrated with, but I do think the institutional knowledge is important. The fact that the legislative process is slow and it takes continuity to get things over the line, sometimes years and years and years and years. And also because there are examples of really effective policymakers that have been in power for a while. Like, I am a big Bernie Sanders fan. I'm happy if he stays in there forever, quite frankly. So I think but I do think that there is, what we're seeing by and large is that that's kind of the exception, and that ultimately, once you have too much power for too long, it does distort things, and you inevitably become disconnected. I think just even knowing what it means to be on the campaign trail is this weird disconnection from your own community because you don't have time and you don't have energy. And just living that right now is interesting, because thinking of politicians that do this cycle after cycle after cycle, I wonder how much are they really in contact with the people that they represent? And I think the answer is that inevitably you're not. And so I do think there is a danger to doing that for too long. And you ask personally, I don't have a number of terms in mind necessarily, but I wouldn't want to do this for too long for the reasons that I said, which is that this is a lifestyle. And I worked in Congress, I saw the demands on a congressperson. It becomes a 24/7 job. Whether they do it well or not, it is very demanding. You don't get to spend time with the people that you love. You don't get to do the things that you love. And so that's just something that, for me this would not be a lifetime thing. This would be something because I believe this is an important public service. It is time to sacrifice and make change in the ways that we can, because we really need to in this moment, but this is not something that should be for a very, very long time. For anyone, honestly. It's actually odd someone would choose to do this for a very long time. It's exhausting. Yes.
Well, just to piggyback off of that, I gotta say, I appreciate that you are all interested in serving in this way. I hold you all in high esteem. This is not an easy path. It's not an easy job when you get it. So thank you for your interest in serving. How about a round of applause for these guys? And thank you to you all for your attention and for hanging out and for giving them your respectful attention. Yes, sir?
Could I pose a question to the members here?
Sure, we can do that. Yeah.
So, just generally, thank you very much. So I've had a chance to speak with a number of you before. This isn't my first town hall. But just generally, could each of you explain your theory as to why Commissioner Harvey refuses to attend a forum with any of you? This is now the third town hall that I've attended on behalf of PA1. He has not attended a single one. It seems like he's invited to all of them. Could any of you please explain that to all of us? Thank you so much.
Mike is very effective in using his thumb, and I think that's the reason. Bob? Oh, sorry.
Mike is very useful and effective in using his thumb. There's a real strong thumb on the scale here, and Bob announced his candidacy back in April. He started rolling. He obviously had been anointed, and he's moved forward. Right now, there's zero political advantage for him coming to any one of these. I think he believes very strongly that he's going to win the primary and that he'll actually begin campaigning after that. Until then, for him, it's just noise. So it's unfortunate for us because we have been in a number of municipal meetings with him that haven't been the formal town halls. And I'll be honest with you, I wish we could instill in Bob some more fire, and he would do better if he came to these personally and have to actually engage. He'd be a better candidate. So it's unfortunate, but it's, as Mike said, the thumb's been on the scale for a long time, since April.
Yeah, I mean, I would say to you that Bob is not here because Bob doesn't need you. And Bob doesn't need you because the political class put their thumb on the scale and made sure that he's going to be on the ballot in May. And not only made sure that he would be on the ballot, but hoarded the resources so that he would be the only one to be able to go to a Democrat meeting and get his petition signed. Literally, we are not allowed to go to meetings of Democrats to get our petition signed because they met on the first weekend to ensure that all the resources would be hoarded for Bob. And that has the perverse incentive of ensuring that Bob won't talk to you. Bob won't talk to you until you eat past the point of no return. Until he is not threatened by another candidate, he won't tell you his positions on anything. And that is a perverse incentive. You could go to his website right now, you won't find his position on anything because he won't talk. He can only lose voices. He can only lose votes. The money also. He doesn't need your money because he has the corporate money. If he needed your money, he would sit down with you and hear your concerns, talk with you about them, and perhaps you'd leave him a donation. But when you're receiving all of your money from APAC and corporations, you don't need to talk to average people. This is the disconnect that results from a party that inserts itself between the voters and representative democracy. My promise to you is as your candidate and as the person who wins in the primary, I will be in a position to come back to this Bucks County party after the election and say to them, we are going to do open primaries because people in Bucks County are smart and informed and they ought to decide who their candidates are. The state lays out a process for this. It's a petition period, 1,000 signatures, 3 weeks, and then there's a 2-month primary window. We don't get to do that in this county because the thumb is on the scale. That's gonna stop. And if there are people out there who pose that, like Steve Santasiero, who, by the way, I think wrote an op-ed piece and was published in the Herald that was full of, had the audacity to suggest that the system, this system, which has, by the way, produced 7 losers against the Fitzpatrick regime, and gave us Fetterman, is the preferred system and the right one. It's a loser. And if that sack of milk duds gets into the office this time around, it's not because he's a qualified candidate. It's not because he went through a tough primary and sharpened his skills and really communicated his policy to the people and won their affection. It's going to be because Blue Wings came in underneath of him and he was the only name on the ballot. And you get what you get and you don't ask for anything more. Got it?
Hear, hear.
I think Steve, editor was in the Beacon, not the Herald.
Oh, sorry, not the Herald, the Beacon. Beacon, where you will find all of our answers to questions on policies, but you won't find Bob Harvey's on there. His name is there, but he hasn't answered the survey. He might tell you something you don't want to hear.
All right, so Mike, tell us how you really feel. All I'll add is, and James, you have, I mean, we've gotten to where I know your name, so you have been at all these town halls and you filmed the whole thing. And I would suspect that this is footage that will end up in Brian Fitzpatrick's capacity and ownership at some point, because it's always a question about Bob Harvey. I have no love loss about what the establishment has done here, and I've been using the thumb on the scale quote since the first Horsham Town Hall. And it's, you know, so I am very unhappy about the way the Bucks County Democratic machinery has operated here. The official answer that Bob's campaign routinely gives is that he's tied it to the petition signing period, and then those candidates that would end up on a ballot, suggesting that once that occurs, he will then start showing up at town halls. I don't know if that's true or not. We would welcome him. We've certainly welcomed him in all the other ones. I think competition improves performance, and unless he's willing to show up and have these kind of, you know, open forums where we can talk about all the issues and everybody can present their positions, you know, he may end up with the nomination, but he will not have been tested, and I don't think that's great for democracy, and I don't think it'll be great for the Democratic Party.
I'll add that I am suspicious of people who don't want to be collaborative and who don't know how to have healthy competition, and I appreciate this group for that. I think that an elected official needs to be willing to talk to people of all ideologies and be able to handle that conversation. I also think we need to be consistent about our criticisms. Representative Fitzpatrick has not held town halls in how many years? So if we're talking about an elected official who won't speak with people, that's why we need a different brand. And I think that goes for both establishment parties.
All right, if there's nothing else, I see your hand.
Can I ask a question?
I just want to say thank you all again. I know you're all citizen candidates and you're putting yourself out here for public scrutiny, and you're great. And you know, you can feel the camaraderie among you. This is the way it should be. My question, as you know from past discussions, is related to campaign finance. I know right now we're in an election cycle where you have to raise funds. I mean, it's just the way it is right now. But I know you all agree that we need to get rid of Citizens United, overturn that, and we have to address PAC money in our elections as well. I want to focus specifically on donations directly to a candidate's campaign, your personal private donations to a candidate's campaign. if you were elected to Congress, would you work to find an alternative to having private donations to a campaign to be replaced by public financing for which a candidate would have to qualify? In my opinion, that would ensure, as to what Mike was, going on there regarding the money, would you work towards having a publicly financed grant for which candidates would have to qualify, and all qualifying candidates would get the same amount of money? Okay, I'll leave it there.
Sure. I would also point out Rob was one of us, also part of this collaborative group. Thanks, Rob. He helped put this event together. And Rob, I learned about that option from you, and I appreciate you raising it because I think it is an incredibly interesting idea that I would absolutely support. I think it is a way to level the playing field. As I learn about campaigning myself, I realize that how we campaign is a model for you all about how we would lead. And so we really need a level playing field, and we need people to understand what is it that we do? What are our ideas? How resourceful are we? How do we appreciate resources? And so having that sort of structure, I think, would test that in a way that is not exploiting resources or having disproportionate resources in elections. So yeah, I would definitely support that.
Very quickly, I think the critical issue you bring up is that you'd have to qualify for it, and that brings us back to this whole notion of 1,000 signatures in 3 weeks. It's almost an impossible mountain to climb. I definitely think that candidates running need to generate some interest and excitement, and so clearly it would make a lot of sense to me that as soon as you announce your candidacy, you meet people. If they like you, they can sign your petition as you're going along and running. There's no reason that it has to be limited to 3 weeks. I saw Lucia get some names at some meetings, and I realized that she would have to go back after February 17th, find that person again, go get that one signature, and then get 999 more. So part of that whole system working, I could see that you get to a point where you generate enough interest through signatures gathered through as long as you need to up to a certain point, and then begin to have candidates say, okay, you generated a groundswell opinion that's significant enough that we'll recognize you, and you can then get access to public funds. And it really, I don't know, there isn't an easy answer to it, and Citizens United has to be overturned. Corporations are not people. And we have to somehow, in the long run, try to get this huge amount of money out of politics. The cost of elections is insane, and people shouldn't have access to that much money. But it needs to begin back with this whole process of petitions in 3 weeks in February to March with lousy weather is really cripples the ability of people to be actually able to run and commit themselves and generate support over a long period of time.
I've only accepted small campaign donations, and I would continue to only accept small campaign donations. As I've said before, this is not a county and not a district that we need millions of dollars to win. That is just money that is there to forgive a bad candidate. And the public financing option is a very intriguing idea. I'm very open to this idea. I don't know enough about how it works to really offer an educated opinion on it, but certainly what we have now does not work. The dark money that pervades our system and perverts the administration of our government is crippling us. And we certainly need to reform at a federal level how campaigns finance themselves and how politicians survive through campaign periods. That's it.
With the caveat and premise that Citizens United is we passed legislation that essentially decapitates it, and we deal with dark money and all of that. I like the idea of it. I would probably propose a small dollar a maximum amount and a small dollar donation with a maximum amount that you could raise. What I do like on the public sort of campaign side is, like they do in other countries, I think the run up should be shortened significantly. As people mentioned here, I think Bob announced in April of 2025 for the November 2026 election. I know in other countries it is a stated period of time that opens and it closes. I think that would help a lot. I would certainly support that. I like much like the other thing, I like the idea of it, the mechanics of how we make that work, because there is a ranking system that you have to qualify or something like that. I want to know more about that, but I think something that shortens the period, caps the amount of money, and limits it to small dollar donations, perhaps within the district as well. I could get behind things like that, because I do agree with you, Robin, that money is, unfortunately, including lobbying money, is ruined so much of our politics, and it's just eroded our democracy as far as I'm concerned.
Anybody have anything else for the candidates here today?
I think we're good.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thanks everybody for coming out.